What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to Roscoe's Ramblings. It's been about a month since I've made a video since the 53-man roster cuts, so I wanted to hop on and give you my review of the first couple of games along with some pick'ems for the upcoming week as I really want to get into doing something weekly. I know I say this every time, but I definitely want to make sure that you guys are seeing my face at least once a week. This is my favorite season. The Seahawks are right about on par for where we thought they were going to be. I thought they would be 2-1 at this point. They're 1-2, close games. So, long season, as they say, a lot of football left. But before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to the Mariners. Yes, sir, they finally locked up their first playoff spot in 21 years. That's a massive deal. I remember watching those teams back when I was a kid in the Kingdom, man. Randy Johnson and Ken Griffey and Edgar Martinez and Dan Wilson and Jay Buhner and squads. They used to have squads back in the day, and then they hit a dark age for some time. But it looks like we're turning a corner with Julio Rodriguez, and there's a young core, a good talented core going on in Seattle. We got some good minor leaguers that we're working up through the ranks. I don't want to get into too much detail about that, but big shout out to the Mariners. See us rise, baby. Let's start with that playing game and go from there. Let's shock the world. On to the NFL side of things. I think the first 3 weeks of the NFL season have been great. We've seen some good games. We've seen some teams that we didn't think were going to be amazing step out to some surprising starts. We've seen some teams that we thought were going to be better not start so hot. So, since it's a week-by-week league, there can be so much parity throughout, any given week. So, for Seattle, like I was saying earlier, we're pretty much right on par, right with what people expected out of us. Gino's been playing pretty darn well. Couple of costly turnovers. That seems to be his Achilles heel. But we'll keep pushing through. He's provided anything better than I think Drew Lock might show us. I know Drew Lock's supposed to have a huge arm, but Gino's been pretty tight, so I think we're gonna roll with him. Week one, he looked great, at least the first half. Emotions were running high as Russell Wilson and the Broncos visited Seattle. The Seahawks came out with a 17-16 win. We held the Broncos to 0 for 5 in the red zone. That was the big tail of the tape. Russ looked okay. He was checking down a whole lot for having some good wide receivers. The timing of their offense was off. They were getting delayed game penalties. They looked sloppy. Now they're all on the road in one of the hardest environments to play. Seattle's been a tough place to play ever since Lumen Field got built. So I can't really fault him there, especially on the idea that, that's the loudest that crowd's going to be the entire year. But he looked off. And to be fair, he has looked off almost every game. He has not been the dude just yet. I don't know if he's regressing or if this is finally the year that, the bubble pops and we really see the difference in between a coaching style like Pete Carroll and Nathaniel Hackett, who's a rookie head coach. But, the Seahawks, they looked pretty good in that game, like I said, for the first half. The second half, it was all defense. Coming out with a 17-16 win, though, big time. Starting off 1-0 like I predicted. Game two, we went to San Francisco and looked terrible. Week-by-week league. We didn't score a single point on offense. It was 27-7, and the only points we scored were on a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown. It was a great play, but that needs to be a compliment within a series of plays, that we can score on offense. We had DJ Dallas throw within the 5-yard line. We ran a wildcat within the 5-yard line. DJ Dallas throws a pick. Terrible play calling. I don't know if that was Shane Waldron or Pete Carroll. Terrible play calling. But to be fair, the biggest storyline from that game was unfortunately the loss of Trey Lance for the 49ers. He broke his ankle pretty early on in that game, and Jimmy G came in. He's going to be the starter the rest of the year in San Francisco, but he made that offense click, man. He knows the Seahawks, so I think that he was confident in going in, picking up the game plan, and running with it. He looked like he hadn't missed a beat. Now, he looked pretty porous week 3 himself, but that's not something that I care to talk about. I don't mind watching the Niners lose, even though that Denver-San Francisco game was the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. But for week 2, the Niners absolutely stomped on the Seahawks. It was hard to watch. But week 3 was a good matchup between the Seahawks and the Falcons back in Seattle. back and forth game. 27-23 was the final. Atlanta taking it. Seattle couldn't stop a nosebleed on the ground. Cordero Patterson ran all over the place en route to becoming the NFC Player of the Week, Ground Player of the Week. But, it's just a matter of fixing the mistakes, staying tight, not giving up third down, lazy penalties, all that kind of stuff that comes along with a young squad. We're definitely going through some growing pains. But one bright spot I would say that we really did have was the return of Ken Walker, our rookie running back out of Michigan State. He looked explosive. He didn't generate a lot of yards due to the idea that he was on a pitch count and didn't get the ball a whole lot, but there were about 2 or 3 plays where he popped. And if we can get his wheels turning along with Rashad Penny, that could be a really, really good 1-2 duo going into these upcoming weeks and throughout the rest of the season. So this upcoming matchup, week 4, is Detroit and Seattle. We're in Detroit, so it should technically be, I should have said, Seattle versus Detroit in Ford Field, which is notoriously a pretty hard place to go in and get a win, even though the Lions aren't the greatest of teams. This year, they're young, just like us, but Dan Campbell does a hell of a job coaching that squad. They are scrappy. Unfortunately, this week they are down probably their 2 biggest offensive weapons in Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift. That does bode well for the Seahawks. However, their backup, Jamal Williams, is a stud in his own right. He can do everything that they need him to make that offense click. So I think it's going to be a really good matchup. In my preseason predictions, I said that Seattle was going to win this game, and I still think that that's going to happen. I think that we have enough oomph, at least in the running game and with Lockett and Metcalf. And shout out to the tight ends. They've been coming up big. Will Dissly's been playing great. Colby Parkinson's been stepping in and making some huge catches down the seam. So I think that we are putting our talent together on the offensive end. I know that on Detroit's defensive end, Jeffrey Okudah is a stud. He's been shutting people down in what is pretty much his breakout years. His first couple of years have been marred by injury, but he's been shutting down WR1s for the first 3 weeks, and he could potentially take Lockett or Metcalf right out of this game. That is something to watch. But like I said, I do think Seattle has enough juice in this. It should be a close battle. It should come down to the last couple of possessions. But I think as long as the Seahawks play mistake-free football, they should win this game. So I'm also going to get into the upcoming slate of all the games for Sunday. Obviously, Thursday, there was a great game between Cincy and Miami. Unfortunately, the takeaway from that is the health of Tua. If you didn't see it, he had a very, very unfortunate tackle where he got slammed on the back of his head and neck, and he pretty much seized up right there. It was really rough. If you haven't seen it, I don't necessarily recommend going and finding it. It's kind of tough to watch, but thoughts and, prayers are out with Tua and his family, and hopefully he can make a speedy recovery and really give thought to, his career and his future, because neck and head injuries are nothing to mess around with, man. The NFLPA and private investigators have launched their own investigation into the Miami Dolphins, so there's going to be something coming out with that over the next couple of weeks. That's going to get pretty sketchy. I think that we're going to find some not good things the way that they run the health facilities in the NFL. I hope I'm wrong, but that's just the feeling I get. Thoughts with Tua and his family. Definitely wanted to comment on that. Moving forward with the games, the first one is the early game, the early game, 6:30 in the morning, you guys. So if you're early risers, this is the one for you. It's in London. It's Minnesota versus New Orleans. I believe the Saints are considered the home team. I don't like that. I have to voice my opinion here. I don't like the idea that foreign games place home and away. I know you technically have to, even though it's extremely a neutral site game. It's just, I feel like it really bums out the fans of those two franchises. For example, as a Seahawks fan, we lose potentially a home game. We get to go to Germany to play the Buccaneers. Like, why couldn't that have been played in Tampa or in Seattle? Those two fan bases deserve as many home games as everybody else. I know that the NFL wants to expand, but it does not make me happy giving away one of potentially only 9 home games. And we had to stretch to get 9. There's 17 games now. But come on, NFL, keep it stateside or open up some sort of NFL Europe or do something where, it doesn't affect the teams that have fan bases locally, man. It's just not fair to those. We can't travel to Germany. We can't travel to London. And do you really think that the support out there is as thorough for random teams when you bring different ones out there every other year? I don't think so. This is why this channel is called Ramblings, though, because that was definitely a tangent. So thanks for staying with me. However, I think Minnesota wins that game simply due to the fact that New Orleans is banged up, y'all. Jameis Winston is done, and Andy Dalton is coming in to start. The last time we saw Andy Dalton, I believe it was 2 years ago or even last year on the Dallas Cowboys, and he was not good. He had all the weapons around him, and he couldn't get that machine going to save his life. I don't think he's got the juice at all. I even sat Chris Olave on my fantasy team. I thought he was going to be great with Michael Thomas out, and then as soon as I saw no Winston, I took out Olave as well. I don't think that offense is going to be anything without Jameis Winston. And then Minnesota still has their hitters in, Kirk Cousins and that Justin Jefferson. They should be just fine. Dalvin Cook, I believe, is questionable, if not doubtful, for this game. So look for Alexander Madison, their backup, who's a sturdy backup. He should be just fine. He's going to come in and make some noise. But I think Minnie gets that win, and I honestly don't think it's going to be that close. I think they win by a touchdown, if not more. Next game up, Washington, the Commanders versus the Cowboys. Dallas is on a roll. Cooper Rush has looked pretty good. They're getting Michael Gallup back, and I think potentially Dalton Schultz, their tight end. They have a good 1-2 in Pollard and Zeke, and I think that they're just going to work down the Washington Commanders. Carson Wentz showed his true colors last week. That's the bad side of that coin. He looked great the first couple of weeks and terrible week 3. That's the roller coaster known as Carson Wentz. But I think the Cowboys have a surprisingly good defense, and they'll shut down the Commanders, and they'll win that game, by anywhere from 4 to 7 points themselves. Touchdown probably winning that game too. Then next up is a strange battle of 2-1 teams in the Chicago Bears and the New York Giants. Both of those teams were supposed to be considered bottom 10 or if not bottom 5 teams, and they find both of themselves at 2-1. Pretty crazy. That's the NFL for you. I have the Giants winning this game. This is a coin flip, you guys. This one was probably one of the harder ones to predict just because you don't know what either of these teams are. Chicago can't throw the ball. I think Fields has like 300 total yards in the first 3 games, along with, David Montgomery, their traditional number 1 back, going down, although Khalil Herbert came in and smashed. He was a huge waiver wire pickup in fantasy leagues. I don't think he'll have that repeat of performance, but the Bears are just not good, right? They did beat the Niners in a tsunami week 1, but I don't think that was indicative of what a season-long Bears team is going to look like. I think the G-men get this done with Saquon, who has looked very good. I hope that his health stays together. It's awesome to see him come back and make some noise, leading scrimmage yards so far through for the first 3 games of the year. So I think they get it done. We will see. The next up is Tennessee versus Indy, right? So the Titans got a big win against the Raiders last week, and Indianapolis had an absolutely massive win against Kansas City. They looked real bad going into that game and pulled out when Matt Ryan had a vintage fourth quarter comeback in him. It was rather impressive to see. I always like watching the Chiefs lose, so that was a plus for me. In that game, though, Tennessee versus Indianapolis, I have the Colts winning that. That's a battle of 2 of the best running backs in the league, man. Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, those are just monsters, man. Both of them can just run around you, through you, over you, whatever they need to do. But I do think that Indy's got the better defense. I think that Indy's got the better quarterback. And I think that they're going to end up pulling that win. That one's going to be close. That one should be under a field goal. Next up is the Chargers versus the Texans, which preseason you would have Chargers were going to run away with this by 20, right? However, the Houston Texans, Lovie Smith has got the Texans defense playing for real. They are not giving up anything more than 20 a game. Now, granted, that offense is tough, and not in a good way. Davis Mills is good, but not great. He's just trying to come into his own. Damon Pierce he's a rookie. He's been good, but what can you really get out of a rookie? You know what I mean? Only so much. So I think the Chargers still do take that game. Herbert played last week, so there's no reason why he shouldn't play this week unless, there's some sort of setback, but I didn't hear anything about that. So I think the Chargers take that one. I still think Houston's scrappy. They keep it close, within 4, something of that nature. Cleveland versus Atlanta. Atlanta coming off that big win against Seattle, their first of the season. They're going to be riding that hype train, but I think that Cleveland has a better roster overall, and it's not even close. Jacoby Brissett has been playing pretty good, well enough to keep the starting job. There's nobody questioning that. And with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and they've got a lot of talent on the offensive side of that ball. I think that they should pretty easily push past the Falcons. Highlights for the Falcons, though: Drake London's coming into his own. He's been looking good. Like I mentioned earlier, Cordero Patterson, he's looking to build off that big game against the Seahawks. So it could be back and forth, but I think the Browns get this one. Next up is the New York Jets versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. On paper, this one's easy to call, but the NFL is wild. The Jets are starting Zach Wilson for the first time this season, so we'll see if he's been able to come back from his, I believe it was an MCL injury. Got a little cleanup surgery, and it'll be his first start of the year. But the Steelers should easily win this game, to be fair. The Jets have some decent young pieces, but they'll look rusty with the quarterback trying to come back and not really having any time to begin with. Michael Carter and Breece Hall have been a surprisingly good 1-2 for the backfield, but I think in Pittsburgh, Najee Harris, he's a stud. Pat Freiermuth, he's a good tight end. Obviously, Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson are a good 1-2 at receiver. And I don't know if you saw that George Pickens catch from last week, but that was one of the nastiest things I've ever seen in my life. That kid can ball. So there could be a 3-headed monster receiver out there. Trubisky's not the dude, but around him is enough to get it done. Pittsburgh, I think, I would still say under a score. Yeah, sure. Probably anywhere in between 1-4 for that one as well. Then next up is Jacksonville at Philadelphia. The Eagles are the only undefeated team left in the league, y'all. They have looked good. They have looked really good. Jalen Hurts has been taking some huge leaps forward in his development. Getting A.J. Brown has unlocked that offense in a way that they've been trying to build for, basically since their Super Bowl win. They've been drafting wide receivers, just not the right dudes. So they finally got the dude in A.J. Brown. And Devontae Smith went absolutely God mode last week, going for over 150 yards. So if they can get, dual performances out of those guys, the sky's the limit for this team. Defense is stout. Fletcher Cox, he wants to run it back and get one more before he retires. Brandon Graham's a stud. They didn't trade, but they signed Hassan Reddick, and then they did trade for Johnson Gardner. Like, the Eagles, man, if I have to go back and retroactive anything, I might have to say that they're going to take the NFC. I think that it's easy to say right now with them being the only undefeated team left, but I think it's for good reason. I don't think that's a fluke team, y'all. I think they are the truth. So Jacksonville should still look pretty good in this game. What a year, 1 year makes, right? Doug Peterson's way better head coach at the NFL level than Urban Meyer ever could possibly try to be. So he'll keep them competitive. There should be a decent back and forth game, but Philly should shut the door on that pretty easy. It wouldn't surprise me if they win by 10 points. Buffalo versus Baltimore. Ooh, this is a good matchup, you guys. Buffalo coming off that tough loss to Miami. Baltimore, Lamar Jackson has looked unstoppable. Probably leader in the MVP race for the first month of the season. A lot of ball left, but that kid is doing it, man. Trying to get that bag at the end of the year, whether it's from Baltimore or somebody else, who knows? But he's playing up to snuff, to say the least. I do have Buffalo winning this game. I think Gabe Davis is going to come back a little bit more healthier from that ankle injury, even though they said he re-aggravated. They said he's going to play. I think he's going to be fine. Stephon Diggs has been lighting it up. If they can get a decent tandem between Moss and Singletary in the backfield, they'll be fine. That Buffalo defense is still nasty. They should be able to stand up and hold Lamar to, let's say under 28 points, give or take, We'll see, but I think Buffalo does have the juice in that game. Cardinals versus the Panthers. Arizona versus Carolina. two teams I don't traditionally root for. However, I think Arizona has enough on their end of the ball to get it done. Kyler's a better quarterback than Baker. Christian McCaffrey is questionable with a quad injury, so he more than likely is not going to play, which is a huge downgrade for the Panthers. Pretty common, unfortunately. It's sad how injury prone McCaffrey has come, but Arizona gets that one in what could be a rout. If Arizona does do what they need to do, they could win that game by a substantial amount. But Kyler Murray also could suck. You know, he's been wishy-washy. It's been a roller coaster 3 games for him too. So Arizona in the win, keep it close. Broncos versus the Raiders, AFC West matchup. The Raiders are 0-3 and the Broncos are 2-1, but I really don't think either team is representative of those markers. I think Denver has been very fortunate. They beat the Niners by 1 in what was the absolute most boring Sunday night game I've ever seen in my life. And the Raiders, Josh McDaniels, I don't think is the dude. He'll get a couple more opportunities, you know, but I think that offense should be absolutely clicking on all cylinders, and I haven't figured that one out yet. But I do think that they have enough to get past Denver, especially in Las Vegas. That crowd's going to be dying for a win. And if Denver looks anything like they have to open the season, Russ is going to get cooked. Yeah, and, you know, as a Seahawks fan, watching the Broncos lose this year is imperative because the higher draft pick, you know, the more they lose, the higher the draft pick gets for us for the one that we acquired in the Russell Wilson trade, big time. We could really, really use a nice high draft pick to potentially take a quarterback in the future. And so I don't like saying I'm pulling for the Raiders. That's really hard for me to say too, but I definitely think the Raiders win this game. New England versus Green Bay. This might have been the easiest one to call just because Mac Jones has been ruled out. They're playing Brian Hoyer, which, you know, good, but certainly not great. Journeyman backup at this point. He's rather old for an NFL quarterback. So I think Aaron Rodgers, especially at home, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Romeo Dobbs has been stepping up big time. Shout out UNR, baby. So I think the Packers get that done. They should be just fine. I don't even think that one's particularly close. I know Belichick's probably going to do some sort of wizardry and run the ball 74 times or whatever and try to keep it close, but I think that that's a 10-plus point game right there. I think the Packers smash. Sunday night, we got a good matchup between Kansas City and Tampa Bay. Mahomes and Brady, or a Super Bowl rematch, right? I think the Chiefs are much improved from that Super Bowl team. Obviously, they were playing on backup tackles. It was not good. They harassed Mahomes all night. I don't think in the rematch we're going to see that. I think he's quicker in the pocket. I think he's starting to figure out his receiving core. I think that Clyde's Edward-Helaire, CEH, yeah, that's right, he's, you know, a serviceable back. They have a good, not great defense, but Kansas City should win that game. Tampa Bay's all banged up. It is Tom Brady, though. You can't ever put him down by more than a score, right? Like, he's always going to be there, whether you love him or hate him. He's the GOAT. But Kansas City does it. And then the Monday nighter this week is the Rams versus the Niners. Very hard-nosed divisional matchup in the NFC West. Those two teams notoriously play each other hard. San Francisco, up until the NFC Championship game, had beaten them 6 times in a row, which is, you know, that's 3 full seasons of a sweep. That's pretty hard to do. However, I do think going into this matchup, LA has the upper hand even on the road. I don't know what the Niners are going to be with Garoppolo. I don't think the Niners know what the Niners are going to be with Garoppolo. He looked bad last week, and that Rams defense is better than the Denver defense, I believe. Bobby Wagner knows Garoppolo just fine. He's been playing against him, you know, his entire tenure when he was in Seattle and Garoppolo was starting for the Niners. So I think that game's going to be defensive battle, unless Stafford has not been great. I know he's been dealing with that elbow injury, but he needs to start finding Allen Robinson more. I mean, Cooper Kupp is an absolute animal. Let's not cut that out of there. The dudes could very well triple crown it again this year and make it look easy. he's been doing the damn thing these last couple of years. So shout out to Cooper Kupp. But I think that the Rams have a better, I wouldn't say roster. I just think going into this game, they have more momentum and they're going to have a better game plan and an execution. McVay is not going to want to lose to Garoppolo. It's just, I mean, he's not going to have the overall say if Garoppolo comes out and just balls, because Kyle Shanahan is one of the more questionable play callers in our, in the NFL. People praise him, and sometimes I just don't see it. Sometimes I think he's just absolutely misguided. Now, this is me obviously commenting from the couch. So he's a professional head coach and I'm not, but I would love to see that game end in a tie, if I could be honest. No, Rams are going to take that game. So this video's 20 minutes long plus, so if you guys have made it this far, I really, really appreciate it. Anything that I've said, please comment on, wins, losses, who's your favorite team, why you love them, anything. Engagement is great. I'm definitely a small channel, so I would love to communicate with anybody who wants to reach out. It doesn't even have to be about Seattle. It doesn't even have to be about football. Just blow up that comment section if you want. Like, subscribe, all those fun things that, these typical YouTubers tell you to do. I will definitely be back sooner than a month, though. Okay, guys? I'm going to do this weekly, so if you want some pick'ems and a review of the Seahawks weekly, keep following me. I would much appreciate it. Take care and have a great day, guys. Bye.